Well, welcome everyone on this beautiful Sunday morning. My name is Helen Christians. I'll be your MC this morning. I want to welcome everyone to Friendly House. This is a great location. HGP believes strongly in freedom of speech, but the views expressed by myself, today's reader, today's speaker, our members, and our guests at today's meeting are not the official views of the Humanists of Greater Portland. Humanism is a philosophy informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. It's a way of life that honors the fact that this is the only life of which we are certain and guides us to live an ethical life without relying on the supernatural. As humanists, we affirm the dignity and worth of all people and recognize the importance of cooperation among people simply for the possibility of peace and well-being when humans interact with respect for one another. Al Christians is our reader this morning, and he's been practicing. I've heard him, and this is a really impressive reading. Thank you, Al, for providing it to us this morning.
Gotcha. The reading today is from Václav Havel. Yes, Marie, he did live in Poland for a short time during World War II, but he was a dissident in Czechoslovakia under the Soviets, a strong anti-communist. He wrote an essay on the power of the powerless in 1978. There is nothing to prevent ideology from becoming more and more removed from reality, gradually turning into what it has already become in the post-totalitarian system, a world of appearances, a mere ritual, a formalized language deprived of semantic contact with reality and transformed into a system of ritual signs that replace reality with pseudo-reality. Ideology, as it gradually loses touch with reality, becomes reality itself, albeit a reality altogether self-contained, one that inside the power structure may have even greater weight than reality as such. It is as though the ideology has appropriated power from power, as though it had become dictator itself. It then appears that theory itself, ritual itself, ideology itself makes decisions that affect people and not the other way around. Human beings are compelled to live within a lie, but they can be compelled to do so only because they are in fact capable of living in this way. Therefore, not only does this system alienate humanity, but at the same time, alienated humanity supports this system as its own involuntary master plan, as a degenerate image of its own degeneration, as a record of people's own failure as individuals. Living within the truth becomes the one natural point of departure for all activities that work against the automatism of the system. Without keeping one's eyes open to the real dimensions of life's beauty and misery, and without a moral relationship to life, this struggle will sooner or later come to grief on the rocks of some self-justifying system of scholastics. The basic job of dissident movements is to serve truth, that is, to serve the real aims of life, and that necessarily develops into a defense of individuals and their rights to a free and truthful life. They do not assume a messianic role. They are not social avant-garde or elite that alone knows best and whose task is to raise the consciousness of the unconscious masses. That arrogant self-projection is once again intrinsic to an essentially different way of thinking, the kind that feels it has a patent on some ideal project and therefore that it has the right to impose it on society. Above all, any existential revolution should provide hope of a moral reconstitution of society, which means a radical renewal of the relationship of human beings to what I have called the human order, which no political order can replace. A new experience of being a renewed rootedness in the universe, a newly grasped sense of higher responsibility, a newfound interrelationship to other people and to the human community. Every attempt to live within the truth must necessarily appear as a threat to the system, and thus as something which is political par excellence. These factors clearly indicate the direction in which we must go.
That was very well read and very, very inspirational. Thank you, honey. That was a good job. Mary Burns, who's our speaker today, is an internationally recognized expert in teacher professional development, online learning, and educational technology, who has won national awards for teaching, for research, and curriculum design. She is the lead author of the Brookings Institute's just released study on AI in education, which is called A New Direction for Students in an AI World: Prosper, Prepare, and Protect. Her latest publication from the University of Lisbon, Eyes Wide Open: What We Lose from Generative AI, discusses the potential risks of AI in education on teacher agency and professionalism. I just want to thank you, Beth, for finding this wonderful speaker, and welcome you, Mary, to do this important presentation about what our children are experiencing and teachers are experiencing with AI becoming part of the education. So we welcome you, and take it away.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Very good. Well, it's great to be here with you all today. I should mention our Brookings report has a lot of Pacific Northwest connections. So Rebecca Winthrop, who is my co-author and hired me for this work, she's at the Brookings Institution, is from Ashland, Oregon. I interviewed Eric Anctil. I don't know if any of you know him. He's a wonderful professor at the University of Portland, and one of the absolute best people that I talked to, and she's quoted through the entire report. She should be an author. Is a teacher at Henrietta Lack School called Kathleen Doyle. So we have a lot of Northwest connections. So I led the research, and I did the research, and then I led the writing for the Brookings report, and it came out in January of this year. It's gotten a lot of play kind of in the US and internationally because it's published by the Brookings Institution. And there's a QR code here if you'd actually like to read it. So I will move on. And our report really begins with this presumption that technology contains a duality. We know that any new technology has both benefits and it has harms. And so this is true of television. This is true of mobile phones. This is true of social media. This is true of the internet. And so one of the things we really wanted to do, the main focus of this study, was actually to look at what harms can AI cause to children. And we define children as 13 to 17-year-olds. And then what can we do to begin to mitigate these harms? I should mention 13 to 17. 13 is unofficially the age of internet adulthood that was established by the 1998 Federal Communications Commission Act in the United States and is kind of filtered off worldwide. And 18, of course, is the age of legal adulthood. So I won't go too much into the study, except to say that we used a pre-mortem approach, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a prospective study. So the idea of a pre-mortem is you look at something you've created, a product, a service, a product, and you say, okay, this thing's been a failure. Why did it fail? So this is used a lot at the Harvard Business School. And you ground the pre-mortem in absolute failure and say that your product or your service has failed, because grounding it in failure actually opens people up to be to have a lot more divergent thinking. And that's what we did in this particular report. So you can see here's who some of the study participants are. You can see the timeline. It started in September 2024, and we published in January 2026. So it was about an 18-month undertaking. We looked at generative AI, so AI that emerged after November 2022. AI has been around for a long time, but that's different forms of AI. We looked at school-age children and youth, 13 to 17-year-olds essentially. And I mentioned our two research questions. What are the potential negative risks that generative AI poses to students, and how can we mitigate these risks so we can harness its potential benefits for the good of students? This is just a little more background on how we did this. This is not a replicable study. It's not a quantitative study. We can't generalize to a global population, although I do think that our research findings hold up really well against other studies that have been done internationally and in the United States. But we had several layers of validation. I interviewed people, coded the data, created themes, brought it to a Delphi panel, a panel of experts. They gave me feedback. I wrote the draft. We brought it to our, we had a steering committee teams. So we did several iterations with them, and we talked to about 505 people from about 50 countries, and you can see the countries that are here. So I'm going to organize my talk today in 5 messages. And the first message really is that children, again, 13 to 17-year-olds, are really using AI for many purposes and in many places. And this is creating kind of a flywheel effect, an overhang. So what do I mean by this? So we know the kids aren't just using AI for their homework. They are using AI for entertainment purposes. They're using AI for emotional purposes. Even if they are using AI for their homework, the longer they stay on a platform, the more what we call drift occurs. So kids will be asking about homework, and then they may actually say, well, you know what, I had a fight with my mother last night. What should I do about that? And then they might say, and you know what, actually, I fight with her a lot. This is what we call drift. And that drift leads to what all technology companies want, which is engagement, stickiness, eyes on the screen. That's the biggest metric. So that's just really an important part of this finding. The flywheel effect is kids start using AI for homework, for emotional things. They start using it for everything. And this is what we heard a lot from teachers, from parents, and this flywheel effect where they're just now using AI. They wouldn't think of not using AI for almost everything. It kind of hides another term that we use in education, which is called the overhang effect. So what does that mean? It means kids know how to use AI in really powerful, kind of creative ways that schools and parents haven't actually even anticipated. So schools may be treating the use of AI as an intellectual property issue or as a cheating issue, but there's so much more that's happening with kids around their use of AI that we really still don't have a handle on. So I mention this because the flywheel effect kind of spins largely outside of adult visibility, and spills from, you know, how to do my homework to relationships, et cetera, before anybody notices that this has real implications, which I'll talk about today. Because we know that children's capacity to learn is shaped by the interconnected growth of their cognitive, their social, and their emotional capacities. So any kind of heavy use like this in a lot of areas of their lives really warrants a lot of scrutiny. And the engagement that I mentioned means that kids are divulging lots of personal information to technology companies, and this has safety implications and that kind of emotional and social interactions that I talked with on AI. That means that more kids are engaging with AI, they're receiving this positive feedback loop, and that affects trust and their relational trust with other people, and it also affects their dependence. And finally, you know, we often treat AI as a school issue, but what we found in our research is that most kids are using AI outside of school. So they're using it on school buses, on their phones, they're using it at home. So if we're going to begin to address this problem, we have to actually tackle AI use in schools, but we also have to tackle it at homes. So I should mention, I should have said this up front. So I'm an educator, and there is a certain amount of educator jargon that goes on. So hopefully I've gotten through most of that. There's one more section there where I'll talk about AI, and I'll use a lot of education terms, and I'll take some time to explain that. So what you can see here is a summary of the potential benefits of AI and the risks, and I'm actually going to go into these in detail. And what we can see here in blue is that AI can in many ways enrich the learning experience of students through improving learning outcomes, through personalizing learning, through providing access to resources, especially for neurodivergent and students with disabilities. But we can also see in orange that AI can really diminish learning through declining cognitive development, social emotional development for students, this kind of damaging of trust that I'll talk about, et cetera. So I'm going to first go through the benefits of AI very quickly, these 6 benefits, and then I'll move on to the risks. So the first benefit of AI is essentially its access. And what we know is that AI can actually expand access to knowledge in ways that might not otherwise be available. So things like tutoring systems or self-paced learning, or even schools in really poor countries where there are no teachers, AI chatbots can actually serve in kind of a teaching or a tutoring function. We know the second benefit is time savings, and this is the greatest demonstrated benefit of AI, and it accrues mainly to teachers and not to students. So teachers are able to save enormous amounts of time using artificial intelligence, and I'll actually come back to this. The third benefit is we don't really see a lot of research saying that AI improves learning. But what we do see is some research saying that AI can improve learning for certain subpopulations, especially second language learners. So because AI tools can adjust the reading difficulty level of text, this really helps kids who are not native language speakers. And because AI can scaffold or support the writing process through helping kids with vocabulary or sentence structure, we know that it can actually help students who are with writing, who are second language learners, if they go through the full writing process, which is, drafting, editing, revising, etc. A fourth benefit, people often talk about personalization. So targeting learning to a particular child's need. What we really see, and where AI has some very good data, is on tutoring. But this isn't generative AI tutoring. This is tutoring that has existed for decades, which uses symbolic AI and which is developed through what is called machine learning, more classical AI, kind of if and then. There's really good data on this, and sometimes it's confused. This older form of tutoring, technology tutoring, is confused with the newer Gen AI tutoring, and that's actually a mistake. But what we are beginning to see is that in some cases, if you layer on generative AI onto a classical tutoring system, because generative AI has natural language processing abilities, it can actually communicate with students in these classical tutoring platforms in ways that these classical systems are unable to do. So it can use natural kind of non-judgmental language. So this is very initial data on Gen AI helping classical tutoring systems, but the results are somewhat promising. The next benefit is accessibility. And we see that AI, like all technologies, really helps what we might call special populations. So children who have learning disabilities, text to voice, voice to text, tools like sign language translation, all of these can help actually kids with disabilities communicate better, learn better because they have access to content. We know that AI, and especially in the form of these companion AI websites, which I'll talk about soon and criticize, but they do seem to be helpful to kids who are neurodivergent, who are especially on the autism spectrum. So kids with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, can actually communicate with AI companion and kind of practice their social skills in a very non-judgmental way. And then finally, the last benefit is assessment. And technology has always advanced assessment through automation, through things like test construction or grading, and AI is no different. And this matters because many education systems are really struggling to gather reliable assessment data without overburdening teachers and without making things too expensive, driving up costs. So when it's designed well, AI-enabled assessment can reduce these pressures while delivering faster and more actionable information for teachers. So this is the kind of good news, happy portion of our show, because I'm immediately going to go into message 2, which essentially is that AI's risks surpass its benefits. Of all the people we interviewed, 505 people, these percentages don't represent people, they actually represent the number of responses, because this was a qualitative study and I coded everything. But 56% of their responses about AI focused on the risks of AI to student learning, to student emotional development, and only 44% focused on the benefits. This data aligns really well with national data that's been done by like the Walton Family Foundation or Common Sense Media or the Rand Corporation. On average in the United States, about 57% of teachers believe that AI has more risks than benefits. So we're quite on target in terms of our research. So I am going to go into the risks, and I want to talk about, AI has risks and it has benefits, but the big difference is that AI's benefits are additive. And AI's risks are foundational. So what do I mean by that? AI can help a child learn to read better, but AI can't help a child learn to read. AI can help kids read better or write better, but it can't help them to learn how to write. And so these risks of AI are extraordinarily foundational, and we know that they increase the younger the learner is. So I'm going to get into these risks now, and there's 6 of them. And I'll just warn you that the first risk, I'll spend quite a lot of time on it. And actually, this is where I will actually use quite a lot of technical educational language. So the first risk that we found, and it's reflected in all of the research and discussions about AI, and I'm sure you've heard this, is that AI is almost an existential risk to children's cognitive development. And in order to understand cognitive development, we have to understand cognitive load. So cognitive load is the amount of mental effort and working memory capacity that's engaged at any given time. So there's extraneous cognitive load, which has nothing to do with learning. It might be you can't hear the speaker in your Zoom class, or the website you're using for your university course makes you scroll too much. But there's what we call intrinsic or germane cognitive load. This is the actual work of actually grappling with content. So this is the issue about load, cognitive load. Now, to address cognitive load, we've often, all through history, we've offloaded. We've cognitively offloaded with technology tools. So the classic example is spell check. So we use spell check to offload extraneous cognitive load, spelling. We can argue about, I think it's important, but some people say it's not as important. But if I don't focus on the spelling, I'm actually able to focus more on composing the thoughts of my written assignment. So, cognitive offloading is basically displacing our mental effort onto technology. I think we all probably cognitive offload because we all use something like our mapping system when we're driving from point A to point B. So we've always done this with technology. Offloading exists along a spectrum. It's not necessarily terrible. And some offloading is actually beneficial. I gave you the example of using spell check so I can focus on writing my essay. However, we have never had a technology like AI that does not distinguish between this extrinsic load, the kind of load that doesn't matter to learning, and intrinsic cognitive load, which is actually the learning itself. And so the danger is that when offloading extends to germane load, all that effortful processing through which knowledge is built disappears. So in other words, when students are using AI to replace, not to support learning, they're generating output, an essay, test results, a project, but they haven't learned anything. And so probably the greatest example of this is with writing. So we're all of the age where we remember writing in blue books, writing essays, writing a master's thesis or a PhD dissertation. And when you writing is an extraordinarily rich cognitive activity. And I'm not going to get into it too much here, but we can actually see that it involves all of these cognitive processes. This is writing with no AI. It's very iterative. I'm writing, I change things, I go back, I revise, I think about it, I change it again. Your brain is firing on all cylinders. When kids start offloading their writing to AI, all of this rich activity in blue shrinks. Submitting ideas, asking AI to draft, evaluating output, asking AI to revise. So why does this matter? I mean, most of the stuff that kids write these are not great products because the power of writing is not in the product, it is in the process of writing, that process that's in blue here. And it's that process that is also learning. And when kids surrender, when they cognitively surrender to AI, in other words, they say, you know what, I'm just having AI do it all for me. They really, can see that those cognitive processes shrink even more. I'm telling the chatbot what to do. I skim the answer, AI rewrites it, I hand it in. So kids go from actually thinking deeply and cognition and generating information to really task execution. So when we talk about cognitive decline, that's what we're talking about. This idea that kids go from learning and struggling and creating and generating to essentially choosing something that AI has done for them. None of that firing in the brain and the synapses has occurred. They create a product that is completely divorced of effort and thinking. So this is as long as I'll be about anything. So kids aren't necessarily not only offloading their cognition to AI, they are offloading their social and emotional development to AI. So this is specifically about AI companion bots, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with these, but very quickly, these are AI companions that are specifically designed to be a friend, a mentor, a mental health expert, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. It's not only kids that offload their emotional states to AI, adults are doing it too. But this is the fastest growing segment of AI tools across the globe. So, and we know that kids, and we don't know how many kids, but we know a lot of kids are using these companion sites because they're lonely, because they're at home a lot, and we know that they're underreporting their use. So what are parents concerned about? They're really concerned about two things. And number one is displacement. They are concerned that my child, this is what parents said to me, I have quotes all through this presentation, my child is talking to AI, but they are no longer talking to me. And they're worried about that obvious social substitution. We know, and we've heard from kids, that they actually value an online interaction with an algorithm that's, you know, kind of designed as an avatar and a human being, that even though this is a qualitatively poor experience, they actually, many kids prefer this to the qualitatively richer experience of interacting with a human being. And people are, you know, teachers, educators, parents are really worried about what this is going to do to children's long-term downstream social and emotional behavior. The third area that we see a giant risk is in the area of relational trust. So what I found interviewing people is that teachers don't trust that students have done their own homework. Students don't trust that the teachers are doing their own work. And I will say they have a lot of reasons to be distrustful. Teachers' dependence on AI tools, I think, is an area that has not been examined the way it should. Everyone tells me that they don't trust AI. Nobody trusts the technology companies. Kids tell me they don't trust AI outputs, but when I probed with them about, you know, how are you using it, it's clearly they're just accepting these outputs as facts. So this deferred trust, as I call it, is the biggest beneficiary of this deferred trust. You know, people, we have to trust something. So when we don't trust these sources, we shift our trust to something else. And the biggest beneficiary of deferred trust right now is AI. And so this focuses on two areas, and I think it goes back to the Havel piece that you read earlier. The first is this kind of epistemic trust. So kids are more likely to trust an AI output, even though we know they hallucinate, than they are to trust information from textbooks or from other sources. And they're much more likely to trust AI outputs than they are to trust their teachers. So this epistemic trust in this body of knowledge, is one thing we're seeing. And the second thing is that we're seeing that this has kind of an emotional impact. There's a lot of emotional trust with AI among kids because they feel better when they use it. They feel like it makes their work easier, it makes their work better. And part of this is because they're actually starting to lose confidence in their own ability. So this is an area that I worry about a lot because it's mutually reinforcing. The more we trust AI, the less we trust other people. And the more we trust AI, the less we distrust humans. I think this has real implications at scale for creating divergent realities. And I don't have to talk to anybody in this room about, we are already a low trust country, in part through social media, and AI risks really accelerating or exacerbating this mistrust. So the fourth risk is safety. And I'll just say that data is to the AI revolution what coal was to the industrial revolution. It is the fuel on which AI runs. And so there's all kinds of harms. There's personal harms for kids because these technology companies, especially on these emotional companion sites, are harvesting large amounts of very personal and data among students, and what we call sensitive data, which in some countries it's more dangerous to reveal than others. For example, your religion, your ethnicity, your sexuality. We know that that there are risks to, there are structural harms from AI, that AI is displacing the reasoning and the synthesis that builds intellectual capacity. And this really accumulates across a generation. And we know there's institutional harms with AI. There's this growing dependence on these commercial platforms, these AI systems, and whose goals don't necessarily align with the goals of an education system. And yet these tools, like a ChatGPT, are seen as much more authoritative than educators themselves. The fifth risk is dependence, and I actually think this is the risk that underlies everything. And we see dependence on a spectrum. We have kids who are mildly dependent on AI. They use it for some things. And I talk to kids who have full-blown dependence on AI to the point where they're anxious if they can't use AI. They feel like they can't do their work without it. Teachers are increasingly dependent on AI. I will say, as someone who uses AI a lot, I am increasingly dependent on AI. And the problem with this dependence is that it really erodes our self-confidence, and it erodes what's really critical in education. If any of you are teachers, you know this term, self-efficacy. This belief that I, as a learner, I can do it on my own if I'm given enough support and information. And we see that that is beginning to be eroded. And I wrote a lot about that in, I think, a chapter that I shared with you called Eyes Wide Open, What We Lose from Generative AI. And then finally, there's inequities. And this makes sense. These AI tools, the free versions, are limited. They hallucinate a lot. They have what we call a small context window. You can only use so many tokens before you have to pay more. But we have language issues with these models, and I'll talk about those in a minute, or I'll actually show you a graphic. I actually want to talk about the bias in AI, in these large language models, the Claudes, the Groks, the ChatGPTs. We know that AI is weird. Excuse me, I'll have to grab some water. I just had a Bobby Jindal moment. So AI is weird. So it's Western. It's designed by educated populations, Western populations, industrialized countries, rich democracies. And so these large language models reflect the values and the perspectives, and their responses reflect the values and perspectives of a really small group of people, most of whom are living somewhere around Silicon Valley. And this doesn't matter so much for verifiable facts, but it really matters for any questions that involve judgment. So, or summarizing the news, interpreting political controversies, providing counseling, stimulating voters, assisting with teaching, etc. So these biases are often really difficult to detect because AI presents itself as very reasonable and balanced and authoritative, but under there is this really explicit ideological position. So I just wanted to share this with you because I talked about weird. The weird is in the E in weird, excuse me, is not educated. It's English. The majority of data that the AIs draw on are in English because the AI scrapes from the internet. As you can see in the dark blue, the majority language of the internet is English by far. And so what does this mean? It means that as you start looking for data in your own language, it may not be there, which means that you're essentially excluded from these large language models. So a perfect example is Hausa, which is spoken by 94 million people in West Africa, Nigeria, Cameroon, and I'm not sure where else. There is only about 2,000 words available in Hausa on ChatGPT. And meanwhile, Dutch, which has something like 25 million speakers, native speakers worldwide, there's far more data available in these AI platforms than is available, especially for African language learners. So before I move on, I just wanted to share with you the risks that were identified by study participants. And I wanted to draw your attention to the orange, because you can see here that the closer people got to we interviewed students, parents, teachers, and then AI experts. They might have had an AI company. They could be the head of a university. They might be a university professor. They could have a nonprofit organization, whatever. But the closer that you get to kids in the classroom, the more concern there is about AI undermining cognitive development. And if you look at all of the data that's presented here, dependence, degraded trust, impeding social and emotional development, really about over 90% of the concerns generally are about what is AI doing to kids' thinking, what is it doing to their emotional and social well-being. So that was the depressing part of our show. Message 3 is basically to say that, look, it is not too late to change the trajectory of AI in education. I talked about AI diminished learning. These are the risks of AI. And I talked about the benefits of AI, which can actually enrich in some ways student learning. So, excuse me. So I want to talk about what we can do, and this is really for this. Again, I'm an educator, so this is a presentation I do about education. But we know that AI is going to diminish learning experience. So let me go back for a second, because another piece of kind of educational jargon, we talk a lot about the instructional core in education. So it is the relationships that students have with parents, with teachers, and how that actually helps them master content. So we know that AI will diminish learning experience if it limits participation in the instructional core. So if kids are offloading instead of using AI to offload their work, if it reduces the capabilities of those in the instructional core, and if it reduces interaction between those in the instructional core, between parents and learners, like I talked about, between teachers and learners, like I also talked about. And we know that AI will enrich learning experiences if it enhances the instructional core. So if it increases participation between learners and content and learners and educators, if it boosts the capabilities of those in the instructional core. So for example, if it frees teachers up from a lot of administrative work so they can spend time on high yield activities with kids, and if it supports interactions between those parties in the instructional core, between parents, between teachers, and between learners. Message 4 is that most schools globally are just using the wrong AI tools. 88% of schools across the world are using ChatGPT. And the majority of learners that I talk to in schools that I talk to are using the free version of ChatGPT. So why is this a problem? Because ChatGPT is a general purpose AI tool. It is not for education. In fact, it's kind of everything it does, its whole design is antithetical to education. Because what does it do? It pulls in all data from the internet. And we know there's a lot of really nasty stuff online that even though tech companies do a good job filtering it out, that's why kids are still able to access, pornographic materials through AI. These general purpose tools are designed for everybody, for all adults. They're trained on unvetted content. Their whole job is a task replacement, to do the task for you. They want to minimize effort, and they're designed to tell you, not teach you. And there's no guardrails or minimal guardrails. And what we really need is intentional AI, so that AI that's designed for learning and for children as users, AI that integrates what we know about learning, AI that's trained on reliable, vetted content, AI that develops a learner's capability, AI that preserves and directs effort, and AI that teaches, that doesn't tell, that guides, that scaffolds, and AI that has a lot of guardrails in terms of safety and privacy. This is hard to do because we're in the early stages of developing AI tools, and most educational AI tools that exist sit on top of these large language models. So they don't have all the benefits. They're not expressly designed for educational use, and they still contain some of the excesses and harms of this general purpose AI tools. So, and finally, message 5, and I am wrapping up here, is that we really have to act now to mitigate the risks and harness the benefits of AI. So in the Brookings report, we have a framework of these 3 Ps, this prosper, prepare, and protect. So prospering is transforming, teaching, and learning to help students really thrive in the age of AI. Preparing is helping everyone really with the knowledge and skills to create the conditions, both institutionally and personally, so that kids can really use AI well. Kids can prosper with AI. And then we want to protect teachers and students from, a lot of the dangers of AI, the things I talked about, the taking kids' data, really encouraging, mimicking this kind of intimacy that these platforms do, so kids get hooked on these companion platforms. There's 12 recommendations that we have here, and I won't go into all of them, but I will go into 3. And the first is, in terms of prosper, we really have to push so that teachers are part of the design. Teachers, students, parents are part of the design of AI and education tools. And that's not really happening. It's happening in some countries like the United Kingdom, which has just started a sandbox, as they call it, to test out new AI tools that developers, if they want to sell their products to British schools, they have to be part of the sandbox where teachers and students are reviewing the tools and giving feedback. The Dutch do this. They have a national online AI development program for educational technologies that use AI. The next thing is, in terms of preparing students and teachers, we really have to promote holistic AI literacy for students, for teachers, for parents, and education leaders. So we can do this without letting kids touch AI at all. We can give them some scenarios like you see here and have them discuss use cases like, should I do this? Should I not do this? Is this ethical, etc. The Brookings Institution is actually preparing handouts for parents to help them understand AI. A lot of organizations are doing that. There's a group in New York called AI for Education, and they do a lot trying to bring up to help parents improve their own AI literacy. And finally, regulation. And that's something we don't have in this country. And there's many forms of regulation of these technology companies that we can adopt. There's whole of government approach. So you're coordinating AI policies across sectors to be aligned with multiple legislative frameworks and a national coordinating body. There's something called regulation by design. You may know about the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulations of the European Union. It's what all the tech companies hate. So the GDPR basically says, okay, your technology tools must do these things, and they must not do these things. So the designers of the tools actually have to bake in safety protections, et cetera. And this has been adopted by a number of non-European Union countries too. If any of you go to Europe and you open up a website, you'll actually see that there's a whole list of things you have to agree to that we never see in the United States, and that's because of the GDPR. There's duty of care laws. This is what the United Kingdom is doing, really requiring companies to take reasonable steps to prevent any foreseeable harms to minors. I believe the state of Vermont and the state of North Carolina are also starting to look at duty of care laws for these AI products. There's product liability laws. The only two types of, products, although these companies consider them services, the only two that are exempt in the United States from product liability are social media sites and AI sites. If you buy a car and the brakes don't work, you can actually, you can have some recourse. A company can be sued, you can sue them, they can be fined, and a lot of places are looking at product liability laws for AI companies because safety is really incentivized into the product itself without necessarily dictating design. And finally, comprehensive specific AI legislation. We do not have a national AI policy in the United States. The European Union, again, the United Kingdom, they have national AI policies. that talk about what constitutes harms for kids, what are appropriate uses for children with AI, et cetera, that ban certain practices outright. What we have in the US is kind of an ad hominem, an ad hoc approach to AI. Donald Trump goes after Anthropic because he doesn't like Dario Amodei, but doesn't go after Sam Altman because he and Altman are friends, even though they're releasing products that are more or less similar in terms of the dangers, the threats that they propose. So these are the recommendations again. And I'm just going to conclude here by saying that I think that, the future of AI won't be, well, it'll be obviously driven by the technology itself, but it will also be driven by the choices that human beings, that schools, that educators, that folks like you make and push for in terms of accountability and design and use. So with that, this is the report again, and I am done talking. So you have persevered. I wonder how long that was.
I have been so kind of lost with what is AI and what's the risks, and you did such a beautiful job giving both sides. Truly appreciate it, but also the warnings. We're open to questions now, and boy, are the hands going up, my friend. You're be ready.
Wow,
Yeah.
fantastic question. What has AI done to performative or holistic assessment? You mentioned it increased some types of assessment.
So what has AI done to formative and holistic assessment? So for the non-teachers in the room, I assume you were a teacher, John. So holistic assessment is, well, I think of holistic assessment as kind of using holistic rubrics as opposed to analytic rubrics. Is that what you're thinking, John?
Performance. So like, well, when a music student knows something, they perform, or when a math student knows something, they can do the math. It's not a multiple choice thing or something like fill in the blank. It's more whole. So you really understand that they learned something. What is AI?
Right. Yeah, I got you now. So right, and then formative assessment. So you're talking about a performance-based approach, and then for those who aren't teachers, a formative assessment is assessment of learning as students are going along. And I think AI is quite good here. I mean, the problem is that because AI can assess processes, it can, which is something that traditional assessments, which we all know about, we come to the exam room, we take an exam. The teacher only knows what I wrote on this piece of paper, because assessment has a blind spot. It assesses the product only, but AI can assess formative. It can assess formatively, and I think that is one of its strengths, actually, because, for example, you could have students confer with a chatbot, and you can assess that output. You can assess those conversations. You can actually have less biased assessments, and some teachers do this, where you have an AI tool assess some kind of a musical performance, and the teacher assess that musical performance, and then they compare their assessments. So this is, I think, a real strength of AI. It allows teachers to assess that process of learning that traditionally doesn't happen. The issue is scheduling, because to do this, you have to change the school schedule, and you just have to allow for, when you have to change the curriculum, you probably have to have students focused on fewer topics, and you have to have more time in classrooms so that students can be doing a performance-based approach. And you want to do that live, I think, because right now AI is so good at faking images, faking audio, and faking videos. So I don't know, did I answer? I'm kind of stopping there early, but did that generally answer your question?
So in other words, we're not really sure of the impact. I'll leave it. Thank you for your help.
Hey, we have a question from Kurt Mackey.
I can read it. That's okay. Kurt Mackey writes, if education adapts AI, wouldn't replacement of teachers be the general trend?
That's a great question. So the tech companies will tell you no. I believe that well, I think it's complicated. So, I think COVID showed us the importance of educators. I interviewed kids during COVID and they all said things like, I one kid in particular, I remember, who got in a lot of trouble in school. He said, I never thought I'd say these words, but I really miss my teachers. They did a good job. So we recognize that there is this whole social and emotional element to education, to teaching, and I mentioned that very early on. Teaching is a relational experience. I mean, kids want to know that people care about them, and a lot of students, I say this as a former teacher, and it sounds like we have some former teachers and current teachers in the room. You already know that some kids come from really sad, broken places where there are no adults who care for them. And it's, a caring teacher can help make or break a kid. And so that's number one. Number two is the tech companies are telling us that, so we'll hold that thought because I think that needs to be foundational. Number two is the technology companies are telling us that, of course, this won't replace teachers, but of course it will replace teachers. Because if you look at what we have in the United States, a lot of online private schools, a lot of private schools, what's their biggest expense? Their biggest expense, and I should say for-profit online schools, for-profit.
It's Sunday. I can't do it be in two places.
We got somebody, it'll be okay.
I mean, their biggest expense is salaries. So an example of that right now is if you've heard of the Alpha schools. So the Alpha schools have been started by somebody in Silicon Valley. And they have 2 hours of classroom work per day. Academics, all of it is done through AI. And then they spend 6 hours with guides. And these guides are mostly young women who are not certified, who can be paid very little money, and they work with kids on products. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how this Alpha school model plays out. But we already see that, if this model is any indication, that we are moving away from getting from certified teachers. So, one more thing that I do want to say, just to complicate my answer and to just show the complexity of all of this, is we have a global teacher shortage, and it's massive. And it's really, it's very pronounced in the United States. It is really pronounced in sub-Saharan Africa. There are not enough teachers, there are not enough qualified teachers, and there are not enough teachers for secondary education. So what do you do in that situation? And this is where technology shines. It always has. Interactive audio instruction. For years, my organization, where I worked for many years, the nonprofit, we designed interactive audio programs to put in classrooms where there were no teachers. In Mexico, they have the telesecundaria program, where a teacher teaches through television. A teacher from Mexico City will teach in rural Mexico to kids because there is no teacher. So technology and AI can be a tremendous support in places where there are no human resources in the form of teachers. So this is a really kind of complex issue, and I'll stop there because I've already said enough.
Okay. Questioner number 2.
Yes, thank you for your talk. One of my favorite expressions about education is that education is not the filling of a bucket, it's the lighting of a fire.
It's William Butler Yeats.
And it seems like our current educational system is more toward filling the bucket than lighting the fire for students. And is it possible that use of AI can actually promote more the instilling of learning, lifelong learning in students, rather than drudgery tasks that a lot of the current educational system seems to focus on? And
yeah, I mean, I push back on you a little bit about that. Yeah, so that's the Yeats quote, and that's used, and that's been a huge critique of education systems. But let's not forget that education systems exist in context. And so there are things that kids need to learn, right? And I don't like the term drudgery because what we consider drudgery, what I would consider drudgery as a 60-something, because I've learned this, is not drudgery when you're 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. These are basic skills that kids need to learn. That's number one. Number two is, as I said, these systems exist in context, and societies, governments, businesses, parents, the communities, they want to know, does this child have a minimum threshold of knowledge and skills? And that, I think, really drives the whole education system, because we have examinations, and we are not a high stakes examination country. I mean, go to France, go to Ireland. I mean, if kids fail an exam, their lives are changed forever. They're not studying nuclear physics. They're not going to be an electrical engineer. So it's very hard for education systems to change what they do, because there's tremendous pressure coming from the outside saying, show us some, we need to see the accountability, we need to see standards, and we need to see that students have met these minimum standards. Now, I think there is a lot of hope for AI, because it's basically like having a tutor in your pocket. And for kids who are, really learners and curious, as one teacher said to me, AI is a gold mine, because you can actually use it for learning. And I think that is what schools are trying to do and what teachers are trying to do. But let's not forget, if you're 12 or 13 years old and you're going through adolescence and you have a bad family life and you don't like school and you don't like your teachers and you want to be an NBA star, then you don't care if you learn math, and you don't care if you learn writing, and you don't care if you really learn to read, because you think all this stuff is really boring and useless to begin with. And what we see there, of course, is kids just offloading everything to AI, because that's happening outside of school, and that can't be controlled or isn't being controlled. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
I have very long answers to your questions. I think I have to be shorter.
We have a question from Amanda Feller. And
so I took a look through much of the report, and those detailed recommendations are they're really spot on in my experience as an educator. But yet fundamentally, as you pointed out with the example of who Trump likes and dislikes, those people and institutions that we're looking to adopt those recommendations are just fundamentally, they're either unwilling or they're unable because of funding or time or energy or whatever to adopt them. So how does your work and the Brookings Institute's work, or people like it, address here in the United States that fundamental barrier?
Good.
Yes, it'd certainly help if we had a different administration. So please vote. And then I think and I don't work for Brookings. I no longer work for Brookings. I was a consultant for a year and a half. But Brookings is a major think tank and kind of a major policy influencer. So Rebecca Winthrop, who's the woman who hired me for this report and was a co-author, she's speaking on the Hill. She's speaking to Congress people. There's a lot of, I think, so I work internationally, and I'm very struck by how negative Americans are about AI compared to people in other countries. And I think that's because we believe that we exist in a state of nature, that it is us alone against these big technology companies who are very cozy with the current administration. Gold bars, shares of their companies, et cetera. Heading up a government organization for a while. Elon Musk heads up Grok, XAI. So I do think, we as citizens have to really push. We have to talk to our representatives. We have to vote. I think we have to educate each other about AI. Parents are really worried about AI. But they don't know enough, and it's not their job to know enough. Their job is not to understand the ins and outs of a large language model and what it can do to their child. And we should have some expectation that these things aren't going to harm us. There should be, at the very least, a do no harm principle. But right now, it's a very challenging environment to be in. It's a very challenging policy environment to be in. But I can just imagine that if I were an AI company, I would want regulation, because right now nobody trusts these people. And that lack of trust affects adoption. So you'll hear all the time, teachers are criticized, they're not adopting, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, they're too slow. I mean, teachers are professional people. They actually understand AI, and they understand the harms that it poses. I showed you the chart earlier. They're big power users of AI. I didn't meet any teacher who said, I don't want to use AI, or I'm never using this thing. You can't avoid it. It's in everything. It's in our Zoom. I'm sure you're getting an AI generated transcript of this Zoom call. Yeah. So, I think teachers, they want that support, but their hands are tied because as educators, we are the lowest level on the food chain, the educational food chain. People don't listen to the people with the greatest expertise in the education system is the teachers themselves. And those are the people that we do not listen to. And those are the people that are often disparaged, especially by the general public, because we all went to school. We think we know everything. We know best about school, and by the technology companies themselves, who are primarily young men who are, love technology, and our teaching force is very heavily female and skews older.
Okay, thank you. Questioner number 3 here in front.
One of the things that I didn't hear come up is that AI is very resource intensive, like a lot of water, a lot of power, a lot of materials. And I was wondering if that aspect of it showed up at all in what you were looking at directly, or if it's indirect through like the tiers of accounts or very local.
Thank you, Scott.
It did show up, and we didn't look at it because, again, not that it's not important. It's just that the report has to have a focus, and the focus was on education. And there's so much we had to cut out, and that was one of them.
Thank you. Questioner number 4 here in friendly.
I was just wondering, you mentioned that ChatGPT was the primary, thing that the students and teachers used, and that they were looking at. Did you say NOLA? I think was the term.
No, that's the Dutch organization, right?
Wait, I was just wondering. I do have a 10-year-old boy that uses AI a lot for some of his stuff. What thing other than ChatGPT would you suggest for to have them, use AI? Because he's going to. He just does.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would work very hard to keep a 10-year-old away from AI. Frankly, I really would. So I wouldn't suggest anything. I mean, there are AI companions, there are AI characters, but there's AI characters that are developed for younger children. There are AI toys, but it's not like traditional digital media. So if you remember, think of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which no longer exists, but all the really rich digital media that they created for children, both, videos on television, on, tablets, etc. You had teams of psychologists, you had learning experts, you had parents, you had even kids themselves who were just working in this long, iterative, detailed, comprehensive fashion to make sure that these things were developmentally appropriate, emotionally appropriate, etc. That's not happening with these AI characters that are marketed at young kids. And again, a lot of them are built on these large language models. So the bad stuff kind of slips through. So I really, really would very strongly advocate that 10-year-olds should not be using AI in any application, in any form, in any way.
Okay. So basically, Street and PBS and all that is a good thing, and get rid of the AI for 10-year-olds.
I'm sorry?
Sesame Street is a good thing. ChatGPT is bad.
In a word, yes to Big Bird and no to Sam Altman.
There you go. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've got just a few more minutes, but we've got 7 questions and So let's finish this. Let's make sure we get everybody covered. So question number 5.
Yeah, I saw on that world map of participants from all over the world, and I saw Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia highlighted on there, and those are not the most open societies there. And how's AI going to affect world relations and how it's utilized in other countries?
Yeah, Saudi Arabia shouldn't have been on there because we didn't talk to anybody from Saudi Arabia. So if we did, then the map is incorrect. We did talk to, and I talked to a woman who in Afghanistan. So as you know, the Taliban has prevented girls to be educated after the age of after primary school. So there's an organization actually based here in Boston that's created with Afghan refugees who are actually using AI to push out daily lessons to Afghan girls on WhatsApp because WhatsApp is encrypted. So AI is being used for this organization, which is called SOLAI, S-O-L-A-I. I don't know what it stands for. I can't remember. Anyway, so it's sending out daily lessons to girls in Afghanistan so that they can continue with their education. And as a little FYI, I actually worked on the Saudi Arabian government's Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's government AI policy very, very briefly before I got myself off of it. So it's heavy on what you can't do with AI. It's very light on what you can do.
Jeremy Knowles asked here on the chat, what would you say to people that say AI is this generation's version of calculator, spreadsheets, and spell check? Those technologies freed people up from other activities, and AI can help with that in so many more ways. How would you respond to that comment?
Yeah, I mean, so we have to remember that the job of a child is to learn, right? They got to learn stuff. They need foundational skills. You got to read, you got to write, you got to have basic numeracy. And it's kind of the argument I said earlier. When you're when you're young, you have to learn how to spell. You just have to. You have to learn to add a string of numbers together. You just have to. So, that's the foundational skills for basic literacy and basic numeracy. And what I mentioned earlier was this whole idea that there's a spectrum of offloading. And there's a lot of argument about the effects of calculators. That's not a settled issue. Spell check, maybe. Certainly GPS systems, none of us have spatial reasoning skills anymore, except for Beth's sister. So, it's those tools allowed us to offload part of our work more on the extraneous side, but retain the important stuff, the thinking. So when I offload spell check, I still am writing my essay or typing my essay. When I'm a terrible math student, so maybe I won't use that as an example. So the problem is that AI is offloading the thinking. It is offloading the doing. It is offloading the effort. And that is what is so dangerous about AI. And that is why AI is not this generation's calculator. It is not this generation's spell check. This is a sui generis tool. We have never had in the history of technology a tool that thinks as well as we do, even better. AI is a task replacement tool. And when you're 12 and 13 and 14, every task matters because you are building your learning foundations. Professionals who are using AI, scientists who are looking at patterns, someone like me, I'm using AI to automate some research I'm doing now for the European Union. That's we're still offloading too, and who knows what this is doing to us cognitively, but we've built those skills. But young people haven't built those skills, and they need to.
Very good. Questioner number 6 here at Friendly.
Yeah, thank you. I'm concerned about the parents' role. because it's easy for a teen to be safe, to not interact with other humans and risk emotional turmoil or interact in nonverbal ways, to learn to interact with other humans after they reach the age of adulthood. So how do you reach parents to try to encourage them to not be lazy, let their children spend a lot of time with AI and look at screens? How do you reach the parents?
Yeah, I'm not a parent expert by any stretch of the imagination. I don't have children. I've worked with parents because I was a teacher for 10 years. I mean, one of the things that we know about children and screens is that it breaks down to a socioeconomic issue. And we find that people who are more educated and wealthier parents are much more likely to supervise their children's use of screens, and parents who are not don't. Like so much in education, it really breaks down along socioeconomic issues. But I think, yeah, we do have to help parents understand these tools. We have to help parents understand their own use of these tools. I mean, everything I'm saying about kids is equally true of adults. Adults are offloading to AI. Adults are addicted to social media. Adults are addicted to AI companion sites. And so I think the first thing is kind of, heal or know thyself. Like we have to be really reflective on our own technology use. I mean, how many hours a day are we spending on these phones? And time is a zero-sum game. If you spend 6 hours scrolling or doom scrolling or playing, games on a phone, that's 6 hours that you're not doing something else, like interacting with a human being or going for a walk or, right, something else. So I think it starts with kind of examining our own uses of technology, our own self-reflection, and then, this is a hard one because it really breaks down on socioeconomic lines.
Very good. Okay. Kathleen is a member, I think she's one of the leaders of Oregon Unplugged, and she's watching today. Oregon Unplugged wants to protect kids from harm of technology products, but not block the benefits. And she asks, your study focuses on 13 to 18-year-olds. Would you suggest that an ideal first step for a state law, no AI for K through 8 grades?
I don't think it's 13 to 17-year-olds. I don't think you can do that. I don't think it's realistic.
Okay.
It's here. Everyone's using it. So we have to figure out ways to make it safer, encourage technology companies to make it safer, educate people about how to keep kids safe. So I'll go back to that framework so they can prosper, prepare, and protect. Where I am concerned is, I think we have to help kids develop kind of the thinking, the foundational skills that they need to thrive in a world of AI. And I think we have to help them understand what AI is. So that's the whole idea of AI literacy, holistic AI literacy. What are these tools? How are they created? How do they work? What is the deep fake? What is digital media? I mean, this has become kind of a life skill. And I wouldn't ban AI. I don't know. It depends on what day of the week you talk to me. I don't think you can ban AI from schools. I think part of the problem is that there's so many kids using AI in unsupervised ways. When they're using it in school, at least they're using it in ways that are much more responsible and transparent.
Okay.
I am worried about this, banning all technology from schools. It's kind of, school is where kids learn to use technology responsibly and productively. I'm all in favor of, getting rid of phones in the United States in classrooms, not in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, where there's that's their only access to the internet. But I think we have to be really judicious in terms of how do we in school teach kids to use these tools very responsibly because and transparently and ethically, because they're going to have access to them for the rest of their lives.
That's right. Thank you. Question number 7. We're right down.
Oh, poor honey. Quick question for Al. Quick question and quick answer if we.
Okay. You say that this all happens in context, etc. How in the world can you get a scientific finding of this is good or this is bad, this works, this doesn't work, when you can't construct a control group because everybody is already marinated in the AI, and you got 10-year-olds who have had it, and everybody expects it, and everybody is used to it.
Question.
How do you? What's the control group? How can you do science in that environment?
Okay, wait.
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, you can't start with such a broad question. I mean, you have to start with a narrow question that's tailored to your particular context. So you have to start with questions that ask about AI's use within the education system. You know, what are the benefits of using an AI tool for ABC? What are the, long-term outcomes, short-term outcomes, et cetera? So then you can do a control group in that particular context.
But the question equivalent of a double-blind study for AI now.
Yeah.
I think what Al was saying is, how do you do a double-blind study? And I think I heard in the beginning is that from you that you really can't.
We don't do double-blind studies in education. It's kind of logistically and financially impossible. Right. And there's some ethical issues about doing randomized controlled studies in education because you're depriving one group and et cetera. But there are ways to do difference in difference studies. There's ways to do very strong correlational studies. I mean, again, I'll go back to, you can do randomized control group. You just have to make sure that the intervention and the study kind of flow together. What typically happens in education, any of the educators in this room will know, is a company comes in, an outside organization comes in, they're here for 2 years. Okay, in 2 years, we want to see these changes. People don't change in 2 years. It might take 10 years. So you have to have, your intervention study has to somehow match your actually research study, because oftentimes the effects of any intervention are distal. They don't accrue for many, many years. And that's kind of a uniquely American thing. We're really, I'll say this as someone who has worked overseas a lot. We are notoriously short-term thinkers. We want things really, really fast. We want them done fast. So, I worked on Department of Education projects. I worked for the United States Agency for International Development on their education project. We want something in 2 years because the accountability layer over us, the GAO or the General Congressional Accountability Office, or politicians want things like that, but life doesn't work that way, especially education, because education is just so complex.
I believe we have one more question, and if you can keep it as quick as possible, we'll go. Number 8.
I'll try to be quick.
Okay.
I've read your emotion. And to me, the most important thing you've told me is that if we don't use our brain, we lose the capacity to have it. And we have to be very careful. The people that drove taxis in New York used to know
London.
They don't know anymore because of GPS. So that's a big caution. Is that correct?
Yeah, the London study of London cabbies, because they have to memorize the knowledge. They have to memorize every single street in London. So they did a big study looking at the hippocampuses of London cabbies versus other cabbies who use GPS systems. And the London cabbies have really big hippocampuses, and they were less likely to get Alzheimer's. I mean, it's hard. My mother died of Alzheimer's, so we don't really know what causes Alzheimer's, but we're all worried about it. So that's a reassuring result. But yeah, the brain is a muscle. Use it or lose it, no matter what age you are.
Good question to end our program. Mary, this was just fascinating. Thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Today, we've all learned a lot, and so appreciate the research you're doing and the work you're doing and the dedication to make education a better place using AI. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.